Hey guys, I'm Mr. Hark. Before we start, here's something real. Florida has thousands of active missing person cases at any given time. Most have normal explanations, some don't. Today's story is about a couple who went deep into the Florida woods in early March of 2025 to camp, hike, and fly a drone. What the drone caught wasn't just something weird. It revealed a hidden opening, like a den, buried behind thick brush, and a massive figure moving like it owned the place. They went back at daylight, and what they found inside and what happened when they tried to leave changed their lives. I won't spoil it. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like, subscribe, and share it. Genuinely helps the channel. All right, let's begin. I've told this story 100 times in my head, and I'm going to say it the same way now because if I start polishing it, it'll sound like I'm selling something. There's a piece of Florida woods where my boyfriend's leg broke so badly we had to drag ourselves to a dirt road. And when we finally went back with wildlife officers, everything that mattered was gone. Not we couldn't find it. Just palmetto, sand, and trees like nothing had ever been there. And what messes with me the most is this. We didn't stumble into it by accident. We didn't get turned around and panic and imagine things. We found it on a screen first. A drone, clean footage, bright daylight, a hidden opening tucked behind a thick brush, and right in front of it, something huge, dark, broad-backed, moving like it belonged there, like it owned it. James drifted the drone closer, thinking we were about to catch some weird animal on camera. Then the thing turned, and it looked straight into the lens. Not curious, not confused, mad. The kind of mad that makes your body go cold before your brain catches up. I know how that sounds. I really do. If I heard this from someone else, I'd roll my eyes and think, here we go. Another couple trying to go viral with a Bigfoot story. But the part I can't shake isn't even the creature. It's what happened right after. This is going to ruin our lives. And for the first time, I had this clear, awful feeling. We weren't supposed to find it. I was 29 then. I was in school for wildlife biology, finishing the part that's less cute animals and more statistics, permits, and learning the hard way that nature doesn't care if you're tired. I had a part-time job at a nature center. I did field labs. I was the person who carried extra water and had a plan for the plan. I wasn't the fun one. James was 32. He was one of those people who could make a gas station snack run feel like an adventure. He was impulsive in a way that made strangers like him fast. He had an adventure vlog channel, not huge but big enough that he thought in terms of episodes. He was always chasing the next thing that would bump the numbers. And I loved him, I did, but we had this constant tension. To him, everything was a potential story. To me, everything was a system, a set of causes, a place that doesn't forgive mistakes. We've been arguing a little that month. Not screaming fights, just a kind of quiet, grinding disagreement that follows you around like sand in your shoes. My school schedule was heavy. His channel was slowing down. He kept saying we needed something big. I kept saying we needed rent. He suggested a weekend in the woods. Florida. Deep enough to feel like you're away from the whole world, but close enough that it's still Florida, still familiar. He said we'd camp, hike, get drone footage, relax. He made it sound normal. I said yes because I wanted to stop being the person who always says no, and because the week before I'd looked at him across the kitchen table and thought, if I don't meet him halfway, one day I'm going to look up and he'll be gone, and I'll be right and alone. So I went. It was early March, which in Florida is a weird blessing. It's not yet that wet, heavy summer heat that sticks to you. The nights can still get cool if you're away from the city. The bugs exist, but they haven't fully declared war. We drove up with the car packed too tight, like always. Camera cases, drone gear, folding chairs, a tent that never fit back into its bag right, and food we told ourselves was light, but somehow took up half the trunk. We stopped at a gas station on the edge of a small town where the shelves were mostly bait, hunting supplies, and sun-faded snacks. I still remember the smell in there. Hot coffee, fried food. James bought beef jerky and a cheap lighter even though we already had one. He talked to the guy behind the counter about trails and good spots. The guy's eyes flicked to the drone case the way people do when they see something expensive. He said, "Y'all camping out there?" James nodded like it was nothing. The guy didn't smile. He just said, "Don't go messing around in sinkholes." James laughed. "We won't." The guy held his gaze a second longer than normal. "Things get hurt in sinkholes," he said, and then he rang us up like the conversation was over. In the car, I said, "Sinkholes. That's a normal warning." James kept driving, tapping the steering wheel to music that wasn't playing anymore. "Yeah," he said, "still creepy." The thing is, I've been around enough outdoors people to know when a warning is just a warning and when it's got something else behind it. And that guy's tone had been not scared, not dramatic, just firm, like he'd seen something stupid happen and didn't want to watch another person do it. We parked at a trailhead area that wasn't busy. A couple trucks, some people in hiking shoes, a dog barking once and then quiet. The forest there looked like Florida forest always does if you've grown up around it. Pines, scrub, pockets of oak hammock where it gets darker and cooler, sand underfoot, palmetto everywhere, low and thick, the leaves sharp enough to slice you if you push wrong. James was cheerful. He filmed little bits on his phone while I checked our gear. He narrated nonsense like, "We're out here in the wild, folks, surviving off vibes and trail mix," and I rolled my eyes and smiled anyway. We hiked in far enough to get away from the sound of the road, far enough that the trees and palmetto looked the same in every direction if you don't pay attention. We picked a spot that felt safe, high enough that if it rained hard, we wouldn't be in a bowl of water, close enough to a small creek on the map that we could fill water with the filter, but not right on top of it. We set up camp. We did the normal things. Tent, tarp, food hung up as best we could, even though the hang your food thing in Florida is more of a suggestion unless you're really prepared. I remember feeling good for a while. The air was cool. The sun was bright without being brutal. The woods had that clean smell of pine needles and dry sand. James flew the drone around mid-afternoon like he always did. He liked establishing shots. He'd do a slow rise above the tree line, pan over the landscape, dip down near the creek where the light reflected like a thin sheet of metal. I sat on a log and watched the small dot of it move above the trees, hearing that faint whining sound. It's funny how a drone can feel loud in the woods even when it's not actually that loud. The sound doesn't belong there. After he landed it, he checked the footage on the controller screen and looked pleased. "Perfect," he said. "This is going to look so good." He was already thinking like an editor. I was thinking like a person who wanted dinner. As the light started to shift toward late afternoon, James decided to do one more flight. That was his phrase, one more flight. One more shot, one more try. He walked a little away from camp to get a clear takeoff spot. I stayed by the cooler and started pulling things out. I remember the sound of the drone lifting, that quick increase in pitch, the way the noise fades as it rises, the way the woods swallow it. I remember him saying, "Oh," not loud, not excited, just, "Oh." I looked up. He was staring at the screen like it had a dead body on it. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His mouth was a little open. His brows were pulled tight. "Babe," he said, and his voice sounded thin. "Come here." I walked over, wiping my hands on my shorts. "What is it?" He tilted the controller so I could see. At first, it was just green and brown, tree canopy and shadows. Then he panned the camera down, and the drone moved forward through a gap where the trees weren't as thick. And there it was. A patch of brush that looked heavier than the rest. Palmetto and some kind of vine growth, tangled and dense like a curtain, except there was a dark space behind it. Not a shadow, not just darker leaves, a hole. James nudged the joystick and the drone moved closer. The camera adjusted, the image sharpened. It was an opening low to the ground, maybe 3 or 4 feet high in the center, wider than it looked at first. I felt my skin prickle. "There's a cave," James whispered. "Florida doesn't have caves like people imagine caves. Not like out west. We do have openings that can look like caves, so my brain immediately went there. Sinkhole entrance hidden by growth. But then, movement. Something was in front of it, not in the dark. In front of the brush, partially obscured, like it was crouched or moving low. At first, I honestly thought it was a bear. They can move in a way that looks almost human for a second. But this wasn't that. It was the back of something, broad and dark, like a slope of muscle. The head wasn't visible at first. Just shoulders and a thick back, and a shape that didn't match anything my brain could label cleanly. James moved the drone closer and I started to say, "Don't," but I didn't get the word out before the thing shifted. And it turned. Just a little, like it sensed the drone, like it heard it. The camera caught the side of its face for a second, not fully clear, but enough to show a heavy brow and something that looked like eyes in a dark mask of hair. Then it turned all the way and looked straight at the drone, People talk about being stared at like it's a feeling, like you can sense it. I'm telling you, I could feel that look through a screen. I could feel the intent. It wasn't startled. It wasn't confused. It wasn't curious. It was the look you see on an animal when you've stepped too close and it's deciding whether to flee or fight. James froze. The drone hovered, steady. The sound of it wasn't loud, but in that moment it felt like it was screaming. "James," I said, and my voice sounded too loud to me. "Bring it back." He didn't move. The thing's head tilted a little, like it was listening, like it was reading the drone. And then it did something that made my stomach drop. It leaned forward, not in a human way, not like a person peeking, more like it was testing the space between them. Then it lifted one arm. I didn't see a hand clearly. I saw a long, dark shape move upward, and the brush behind it shook like something big had shifted weight. James finally moved his thumbs like his body remembered how. The drone pulled back just a little, and the thing took one step forward. Not fast, not dramatic, purposeful, like, "You don't belong here." James yanked the drone backward harder, and the camera view jolted. The thing stayed in frame for a second longer. Then, as the drone retreated, the brush swallowed it and the hole disappeared behind green. James flew the drone straight back to the clearing so fast it almost looked like the footage was sped up. He landed hard, not smooth like usual. The drone skidded a little in sand. For a second, neither of us talked. We just stared at the controller screen, which now showed a boring view of sand and pine needles. Then James exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a long time. "What was that?" he said. My mouth was dry. "I don't know." He looked at me like he wanted me to fix it, like he wanted me to pull an answer out of my education and make it normal. I tried. I really did. "Could be a bear," I said, even though I didn't believe it fully. James shook his head immediately. No, that was like a gorilla." "A gorilla in Florida?" I said, and I heard how it sounded, not mocking. "Just tired." He swallowed. "Then what is it?" I stared at the trees beyond our camp, half expecting to see something watching us through palmetto. I didn't. It was quiet, but woods are always quiet in a certain way right before evening. The birds change. The wind shifts. Everything gets a little still. James said, "We have to go see it." "No," I said quickly. He laughed, like I'd made a joke. "I mean, not right now. Tomorrow. Daylight. We find that spot. We film it." No, I repeated, and this time I meant it. His smile faded a little. "I'm not saying we go mess with it," he said, already defensive. "Just look. From a distance. That's content. That's like career stuff." "James," I said, and my voice shook, which made me angry at myself. "We don't know what that was. It looked like it was guarding something." He looked back down at the drone, like he could rewind life. "It looked like Bigfoot," he said quietly. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. "Bigfoot isn't real," I said automatically. James snapped his eyes to me. "Then, what was that?" I didn't have an answer. And that's the thing that makes people do stupid stuff. Not knowing. Curiosity is like pain. It demands attention. We ate dinner, but it didn't feel like dinner. It felt like we were just chewing to have something to do. James kept rewinding the footage on the controller and watching that moment where it turned. He tried to act excited, but his voice kept slipping into something else. "Look at the shoulders," he said. "Look at that. That's not a bear." I watched it again and again. The pixelated image, the way the dark hairs seemed to catch the light in places. I kept thinking about the eyes, the glare. At one point he said, "This is it. This is the thing." I didn't say anything. I went to the creek to filter water, and I stood there longer than I needed to. The water was slow, dark like tea. The air near it was cooler, and it smelled like mud and plants. I listened. Not for Bigfoot. I listened like you do when you're trying to tell if you're alone. The woods sounded normal. Frogs starting up. A bird call in the distance. Leaves shifting. And still, I had this feeling, this low pressure in my chest. Like the air had changed. When I came back, James had already posted a teaser clip to his channel story. Like a "we found something crazy, stay tuned," without showing the creature clearly. Just enough to hook people. He grinned at me like he'd done something clever. "Nobody can say it's fake if we go back tomorrow and show the cave," he said. I wanted to tell him to stop. I wanted to tell him that making it public made it worse. That if it was a person in a suit, okay, whatever. But if it wasn't, I didn't say it. I didn't want to be that person again. That night, the woods felt tighter. We sat by a low fire, more for comfort than heat. The flames reflected in James's camera lens when he did little talking head bits. He kept his voice light, but you could hear the effort. Heh, so guys, we might have found something, he said, and then he laughed and cut the recording. You're not even going to use that, I said. I might, he said, but he didn't sound sure. We crawled into the tent around 10. The air was cool enough that I pulled my sleeping bag up to my chin. James lay there next to me, breathing loud like he was trying to fall asleep by force. Outside, the night sounds thickened. Frogs. Crickets. An owl call that echoed. At some point, I heard something far off that made me lift my head. A knock. Like wood on wood. One, then a pause, then another. James whispered, "Did you hear that?" "Probably a branch," I whispered back, even though it didn't sound like wind. We lay still. A few minutes later, another sound. A crack like something heavy stepping on dead wood, then quiet again. I tried to breathe slow. I tried to tell myself I was being ridiculous. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way it had stepped forward at the drone. Not chasing, not frantic. Warning. At some point, James's hand found mine in the sleeping bag. He squeezed like he didn't want to admit he needed it. I squeezed back. I don't know when I fell asleep. I know I woke up at least twice, each time feeling like something had shifted outside. Each time the woods were normal, just night noises. Then, sometime close to morning, I woke up to the smell. Like wet dog, but deeper. I sat up and James whispered, "What? Do you smell that?" I whispered. He sniffed. His face tightened. Yeah. We listened. Nothing. No cracking branches. No footsteps. Just the same night chorus. The smell faded after a while, or maybe I just got used to it. But I didn't sleep again. When the sky finally started to lighten, I felt relief like a drug. James sat up and said, "Okay, let's do it." I said, "We go look." "We don't go in. We don't get close." He nodded too fast. "Sure," he said. "I should have packed up camp and left right then. I know that. That would have been the smart, boring choice. Go home. Tell the story later. Let it become a weird thing that happened and not the thing that breaks your body." But we didn't. We ate quick. Protein bars. Water. No coffee because we didn't want to fuss with it, and also because James's hands were a little shaky and he kept dropping things. We left camp mostly set up, thinking we'd come back by midday. We took minimal gear. Water, first aid, my phone, his phone, one camera with a strap, and the drone controller even though he wasn't flying it. He said it felt like a compass, like proof the whole thing wasn't a dream. I made him take a small can of bear spray, even though I knew in my gut it wouldn't matter if that thing decided to come at us. We started walking in the direction James thought he'd flown. This is where people always ask, later, how could you find it again? How could you lose it? The woods don't have street signs. And Florida woods in particular can be brutal that way. Pines and palmetto and sand, repeating. The canopy hides the sky. Your sense of direction slips. But we weren't wandering blind. James had the drone footage. He had watched it so many times he could point out a specific dead tree, a lighter patch of sand, a bend in the creek visible in the distance. We moved slow at first, checking landmarks. I tried to act calm. I tried to stick to my "this is a normal field-checked" mindset. But every time the palmetto rustled, my shoulders tensed. James, of course, started filming. "Okay," he whispered, camera up, eyes bright. "So this is the area where we got that insane drone shot yesterday, and we're heading in right now." I hissed, "Stop narrating." He looked offended. "People like context," he whispered. "People aren't here," I whispered back. "We are. Shut up." He did for a while, but I could feel his energy. After maybe 40 minutes, the air changed. It got cooler. We dropped into a shallow dip where the ground held more moisture, and the smell of the creek got stronger. James slowed and lifted his hand. "Wait," he whispered. I froze, hearing nothing. He pointed ahead. There was a tangle of brush that looked wrong. Not wrong like magical. Wrong like it had been messed with. Palmetto leaves bent and snapped, vines pulled aside. A dark space behind it. My heart started pounding so hard it made my ears throb. James mouthed, "There." I wanted so badly to turn around, right then. Just say, "Okay, we found it, we're leaving." But before I could, James moved forward like he was being pulled. "James," I whispered. He didn't stop. The opening was exactly like on the drone footage. Low, hidden, but obvious once you were right there. The brush around it looked like it had been pushed back repeatedly by something moving in and out. There were scuff marks in sand, not clear tracks but disrupted ground, and the smell hit us hard. That musky, wet dog smell, but stronger, mixed with something else underneath that made me swallow bile. James lifted the camera, whispering, "Oh my God, oh my God." I grabbed his arm. "From here," I whispered. "We look from here." He shook me off gently but firmly. "It's just a hole," he whispered. "It's just a cave." "Babe, come on, we have to." "No," I said, "we don't." He stepped closer anyway. The air coming out of the opening was cooler than outside, like a breath. It carried that smell and it felt damp on my face. James shined a small flashlight into it. The beam cut across sand and rock and darkness. "It goes back," he whispered, and there was awe in his voice. I forced myself to look. My eyes adjusted. At first, I just saw uneven ground. Then, shapes. White shapes. Scattered. Bones. Not a pile like a neat mound. More like they'd been dragged and dropped over time. Some larger, like deer. Some smaller. Some that looked like old pieces. Sun-bleached, cracked. James whispered, "No way." I felt my stomach turn. "This is a den," I whispered. James took a step inside. The sound of his boot on sand inside that opening sounded too loud, like being inside a room. I grabbed his backpack strap. "James." "No." He turned, eyes wild. "Look at this," he said, like I was missing the best part. "This is not the best part," I hissed. This is bones." He moved the flashlight around. There were other things too. Not just bones. A piece of fabric. A strap. Something metallic that caught the light and glinted, like a rusted buckle. James crouched and reached toward it. "Don't touch anything," I said sharply. He froze, hand hovering. He looked at me, annoyed. "What do you think it's going to do? Arrest me?" "I think it's going to come back," I said, and my voice cracked. "And I think we're standing in its house." James laughed once, too loud, then slapped his hand over his mouth like he realized. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, okay, okay. But we can film. Just film. We get this. We get out." Nora, the student part of me, wanted to document everything too. It's embarrassing to admit. The shapes, the placement, the unnatural mix of found items. It made my brain light up in a sick way. But the other part of me, the animal part, was screaming, "Leave." I stepped just inside the opening, enough to see better, keeping one foot outside like that would somehow save me. The cave smelled like damp earth and ammonia and old animal. The air was cooler, and it made my skin prickle. James moved deeper, and his flashlight beam revealed a darker section farther back that dropped slightly, like the cave slanted down. "Okay," he whispered, voice thrilled again. "Okay. This is insane. This is like..." "James," I said, and I heard my own fear. "We're leaving." He didn't even turn. He took another step. And that's when I saw something that made me stop breathing. In the corner, half buried in sand and debris, there was what looked like a shoe. Not a fresh one. Old. Faded. One of those heavy boots people wear hiking. I stared at it, and my mind did that thing where it tries to make it normal. Maybe someone lost it. Maybe it washed in. But why would a boot be in a cave behind hidden brush with bones? I felt tears sting my eyes, which made me angry. I wasn't trying to cry. My body was just reacting. "James," I said low, "there's human stuff in here." He finally turned, and the look on his face shifted, like the excitement got punched out of him for a second. He came back toward me, peered where I pointed. His mouth opened, then closed. He whispered, "Okay." For a moment, I thought he was going to agree. I thought he was going to be the smart one. Then he swallowed and said, "That's even bigger. That's proof somebody else was here. That's proof somebody didn't leave," I snapped. He flinched. The silence that followed felt heavy. The cave seemed to absorb sound. Even our breathing felt too loud. "Come on," I whispered. "Please." He hesitated, then nodded tight-jawed. "Okay," he said, quiet. "Okay. Okay, we go. We backed out. James kept the camera rolling, and I wanted to slap it out of his hands, but I was too focused on getting out of that air. When we stepped outside, the warmth of the sun felt fake, like stepping out of a cold room into a normal day. James lowered the camera and exhaled hard. "Did you see that?" he whispered, eyes wide. That was like, "Stop," I said. "We're going back to camp." Now. He looked at the opening again, like he was leaving treasure behind. Then he nodded, and we started walking away. We made it maybe, I don't know, a few meters. Not far. Enough that the opening was behind brush again, not fully visible. And then the woods did that thing that makes your spine go cold. Everything went quiet. Not totally silent, but the normal background noises dipped, like you turned down the volume. James slowed. "What?" he whispered, and his voice was different now, smaller. I didn't answer because my throat wouldn't. I just looked ahead through the trees, and I saw it. At first, it was a shape that didn't fit, a vertical dark mass between trunks where there shouldn't be one. Then it shifted slightly, and the light caught it. Hair, dark, matted looking, the outline of shoulders that were too broad, a head that sat heavy on a thick neck. It was standing among the trees like it had always been there, not hidden. Distance is hard in woods. Later we argued about how far, how close, but I remember the feeling. It was close enough that I could see the shape of its arms hanging down and the way its chest moved with slow breathing. It wasn't a bear. Bears don't stand like that, not for that long, not like they know exactly what they're doing. James whispered, "Oh my God." And then, like an idiot, like the biggest idiot on earth, he stepped forward. He didn't run. He didn't freeze. He stepped toward it like he was trying to make a moment. "James," I hissed. He didn't look at me. He lifted the camera slightly, not fully aiming it, almost like he was afraid to commit. And the creature moved. It didn't charge immediately. That's what people expect, like a movie. It shifted its weight. It leaned forward slightly, and it made a sound. Not a roar, not a scream. A low, sudden huff, like air forced out of something big and angry. The sound hit my chest more than my ears. James stopped moving. His face went blank. And then the creature came. It covered ground fast. Not with long, graceful strides, with heavy, powerful movement that broke brush and made branches snap. It was like the woods exploded around it. I screamed. I don't even remember deciding. It just came out of me. "Run," I yelled. James turned, and for 1 second I saw his eyes. He was terrified. We ran. And this is where memory gets weird, because adrenaline makes everything both slow and fast. I remember the palmetto slashing at my legs, the sand giving under my feet, my lungs burning. James's breathing sharp behind me. I remember glancing back once and seeing a blur of dark moving between trunks. I remember James shouting, "No, no, no," but he couldn't accept what was happening. We veered toward the creek instinctively because it was a landmark, because water shows you a line to follow, because my brain wanted something that made sense. I heard a thud behind us, and then a sound like something hitting something else. James yelled, a short, sharp sound of pain that made my stomach drop. I spun back without thinking. He was down on one knee, half collapsed, clutching his leg. His camera had swung and hit the sand. The strap was tangled around his wrist. The creature was right there. Not on top of him yet, but close enough that I could see it clearly for the first time. And I'm not going to give you some perfect description. I can't. My brain didn't take a calm picture like a tourist. What I saw was big. Bigger than any person I've ever stood near. Broad. Hair everywhere, uneven, clumped in places like it was wet or matted. A face that was partly visible through shadow and hair, with a heavy brow and dark eyes that looked locked in, focused. Its mouth was open slightly, and I could see teeth, not like a smile, like an animal breathing hard. It swung one arm, not like punching, more like swatting, and it hit James or the space right next to him, and James went down harder, screaming. The sound he made wasn't a movie scream. It was raw. My body went cold. I did something I didn't think I could do. I ran toward James. I grabbed his arm, tried to yank him up. "Get up," I yelled. "Get up, please." His face was white. He was shaking. "I can't," he gasped. "I can't." The creature took a step forward. The smell hit me like a wall. wet animal and sour rot and something sharp like urine. I fumbled for the bear spray with shaking hands, not even sure where it was. My fingers wouldn't work. Then, suddenly, the creature stopped. It lifted its head slightly, as if listening to something else. It made a short, sharp sound, not a word, more like a grunt with force. Then it looked at me, and I swear, in that moment, it felt like it made a decision. Because instead of continuing to attack, it stepped back just enough to give us space, like it wanted us to leave. Like it had proven its point. Like, get out. James coughed, and it flinched, then huffed again. I finally got the bear spray out and aimed it with both hands. I didn't even know if it would matter, but that's all I had. I sprayed. A bright orange mist shot out, and some of it hit the creature's chest and shoulder. Some of it drifted in the air between us. The creature jerked back and made a sound that was more anger than pain. It didn't run away, but it stepped sideways, blinking, shaking its head. That moment was enough. "Move," I screamed at James. I hooked my arm under his, and I pulled with everything I had. He screamed again as he tried to put weight on his leg. His body shook. He was crying, but not like sobbing, just tears spilling while he tried to breathe. We stumbled. We didn't run. Not yet. The creature made another huff and took one step forward, but it didn't fully commit. And then, like it was done, it turned slightly and moved back into the trees, melting into the brush in a way that didn't fit its size. It was there, then not, but I knew it hadn't gone far. I could feel it watching. I grabbed James's shoulder. "Now," I hissed. Now. We limped. We didn't care about scratches. We didn't care about noise. We cared about distance. James kept gasping, my leg, and I kept saying, I know, like that helped. His camera was gone. The drone controller was gone. Somewhere in the chaos, I dropped my phone and didn't even realize until later. We reached the creek, and the ground near it was softer, more damp. It sucked at our shoes. James nearly collapsed. "Hide," I said, voice shaking. We hide. There were rocks near the water, not huge boulders like out west, but big enough stones and a rise of earth that could give cover. We half-crawled behind them, pressed ourselves low, breathing hard. James's face was slick with sweat. His lips looked pale. "I'm sorry," he whispered suddenly, and it was so small it broke my heart. "Shut up," I whispered. "Just breathe." We listened. At first, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Then, a branch crack. Not close. Not far. Another. I held my breath. James's hand was gripping my wrist so tight it hurt. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, but later we guessed it was maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15. Time does not behave normally when you're waiting to die. The woods slowly filled back in. Frogs. A bird call. The normal sounds of things pretending it's normal. But I never once believed it was gone. I believed it was deciding what to do. James whispered, "Do you think it's gone?" I didn't answer. I couldn't say yes. Saying yes felt like inviting it back. I peeked over the rock barely, just enough to scan. Trees. Palmetto. Light through branches. Nothing. Then, faintly, that smell again, like it was passing on the wind. I sank back down. "We have to get to the road," I whispered. "How?" James gasped. "We follow the creek line until it meets the trail," I said, even though I wasn't sure anymore. We move." James tried to nod. His jaw clenched and his eyes filled again. "You're going to have to put weight on it," I whispered, hating myself. "A little. Just to move." He made this choked sound. "I'm going to pass out," he whispered. "Don't," I said, too harsh. "Please don't." I tore a strip from my shirt, tried to tie it around his thigh above where he said the pain was worst. I just wanted pressure, support, anything. His leg looked wrong. Not like a bone sticking out, but like the alignment wasn't right. His knee was bending in a way that made my stomach flip. I tried not to look too closely. We started moving. Every step was a negotiation. I'd take a step, brace, pull him forward. He'd bite down on a sound. Sometimes he'd yelp anyway. The woods around us looked the same. The smell of the creek followed us. The sun climbed. The day got warmer, and sweat made our scratches sting. We were bleeding in dozens of tiny places. Our clothes were snagged and torn. We looked like people who'd been dragged. At one point, James whispered, "The gear." I almost laughed, a short, broken sound. I don't care, I said. We have the footage, he whispered, and his voice was desperate, like he needed to believe we hadn't lost everything. I froze. The drone, the controller, the camera, his phone, maybe he had it, maybe not. I checked my pockets and felt nothing. My stomach dropped again. We don't, I whispered. James stared at me like he didn't understand. We lost it, I said, and even saying it felt unreal. We lost everything. He blinked, and I watched him process it piece by piece. Then his face crumpled. Not from losing content, from realizing what that meant. No proof. Just us. Just our bodies and our story. We kept moving. At some point, I stopped hearing normal woods and started hearing everything as a threat. Every bird sound made me jerk. Every rustle felt like movement. James's breathing got shallow. He kept going pale. Talk to me, I said. He tried to laugh, but it was weak. I'm never going camping again, he gasped. Good, I said, and my voice broke. We reached a sandy track after what felt like hours. A wide path, not paved, but clearly used by vehicles. It looked like a lifeline. I felt this surge of relief so strong my knees nearly gave out. We're out, I whispered. James tried to step onto it and his leg gave. He cried out and collapsed to the ground, half on his side, half on his stomach. I dropped next to him, suddenly shaking. You can't stop, I said, but my voice sounded far away. We can't stop, he whispered. I can't. I looked down the sandy track and saw nothing, just trees and bright sky. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream for help, but the sound wouldn't come out right. So, I did what I could. I stood up and stumbled down the track, waving my arms like an idiot, yelling until my voice tore. Help, help, my voice sounded small in that huge space. Then I heard something. An engine. Faint at first, then louder. A vehicle coming down the track. I ran toward it, half tripping in sand. A truck appeared through the trees, moving slow and careful. When it saw me, it stopped hard. A man leaned out, eyes wide. What the hell happened to you? He yelled. I pointed behind me, shaking. My boyfriend, I choked. He's hurt. Please. The man jumped out. Another person was in the passenger seat. A woman, she got out too. They looked at me like I was a wild animal. They followed me back to James. James tried to sit up, then collapsed again. His face was gray. The man swore under his breath. What did this? He asked. I opened my mouth. And this is the part that still makes me feel ashamed. Because I didn't say it. I didn't say a Bigfoot. I didn't say a creature. I said the first thing my brain thought would get us help without making them leave. An animal, I said. Something big. The man nodded like that made sense. He said, snake? No, I said. It hit him. It. The man's eyes flicked to the woods, and for a moment I saw fear there. Not disbelief. Fear. He said, all right, get him in the bed. They helped lift James. He screamed when they moved him, and then he went quiet, like the pain stole his voice. They laid him in the truck bed on a tarp. The woman gave him water and he coughed, then drank greedily. I tried to climb in the back with him, but the man said, front, you need to tell me where you came from. I got in the passenger seat, hands shaking, and tried to explain through gasps. Camp location, trail. We were hiking. We got turned around. I didn't mention the cave. Not then. Not yet. My brain was focused on one thing. Get out, get safe. As we drove, the woods flashed by, same trees, same palmetto. It looked harmless from a truck. James moaned in the back, and every sound made my chest tighten. We hit a paved road eventually. The man said he'd call for help once he got signal. His phone was up, searching. The woman kept looking back at James. At some point, the adrenaline started to drain out of me. The shake in my hands got worse. My mouth went numb. My vision blurred. I remember the man saying, stay with me. Hey, stay with me. I remember trying to answer and not being able to make words. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, there were bright lights and voices and that clean chemical smell of a hospital. My mouth was dry like sandpaper. My body hurt everywhere, but in a dull way, like bruises. James was in a bed nearby, his leg in a brace, and there was an orthopedic doctor talking to someone at the foot of his bed. James looked at me when I moved, and his eyes filled. I thought you left me, he whispered. I felt my throat close up. I didn't, I whispered. I didn't. He was doped up on pain meds, but his fear was still there under it. A nurse came over, checked my vitals, asked questions. How many fingers? What day? Did I know where I was? She peeled back a bandage on my arm and cleaned a cut. Somewhere in the middle of all that, a deputy came in. Uniform, calm voice, notebook. He asked what happened. James tried to talk, but his voice broke. I answered because I could. I told him we were hiking. We got attacked by an animal. We ran. James got hurt. We got lost. We found the road. The deputy listened, face neutral. He asked, "Bear?" I hesitated. I thought about that stare, about the way it stood, about the hand-like arm movement, about the cave. "No," I said quietly. The deputy's pen paused. "What then?" James whispered. It was. His eyes darted around the room like he was afraid of how it sounded. The deputy watched us. I swallowed hard. "I don't know," I said. It was big, taller than a man, covered in hair. The deputy's expression changed slightly. Not into a grin, not into ridicule, into something like he'd heard this before. He didn't say Bigfoot. He didn't say skunk ape. He just said, "All right," and he wrote something down. He told us wildlife authorities might follow up. He asked if we'd been drinking. We hadn't. He asked if we had pictures. We didn't. That's when James started to cry in a way I had never seen. Silent tears, shaking shoulders. "The footage," he whispered. "We had it. We had it. We had." I reached for his hand. "It doesn't matter," I said, even though part of me knew it mattered, because without it we were going to be those people. James squeezed my hand like he was holding on to the only thing real. A day later, a wildlife officer came to talk to us. He didn't look amused. He looked tired. The kind of tired people get when they deal with the public all day. He asked for the location. I described it as best I could. Trailhead, general area, the creek, the opening, the brush, the bones. The officer's eyes sharpened at bones. "What kind of bones?" he asked. "Deer," I said, then corrected myself. "I think, and other animals." "Any human remains?" he asked bluntly. I felt nausea surge. "I don't know," I said. "There was a boot and a strap." He nodded slowly. "All right," he said, and his tone was careful now. "We're going to need to check then." James whispered. It was a Bigfoot. The officer didn't flinch. He didn't laugh. He just looked at James for a long second. "We call it a lot of things," he said finally. "Most of the time, it's not what people think it is. But if there's a cave with remains, we need to see it." James's eyes lit up a little. "Yeah," he said, voice urgent. "We'll take you. We can show you." The officer's gaze shifted to me. "You sure you want to go back out there?" he asked. I should have said no. I should have protected myself. But the idea of something like that existing, and no one checking it, the idea of that boot just sitting there, it made me feel sick. And also, I wanted the validation. I wanted the world to say, "You're not crazy." You didn't imagine it, so I nodded. "Yes," I said. They didn't take us back immediately. James needed surgery. A cracked femur is not a walk-it-off injury. He had to stay. I had to get checked out for concussion symptoms because I'd blacked out. They kept asking me if I felt dizzy. I did. Everything felt like I was in someone else's life. Days passed. Then, over a week, James's leg was stabilized. He was given a walker. He looked older in the hospital room, like the reckless part had been peeled away. By the time they agreed to take us back, it was not some dramatic search party. It was 2 wildlife officers, 1 deputy, and us in a vehicle that smelled like vinyl and equipment. James was still hoping for content. He kept saying, "Maybe the drone is still there. Maybe we can find it." I didn't say what I was thinking. If that thing wanted the drone gone, it was gone. We drove out and parked at the trailhead. The day was warmer. More people were around. The forest looked friendly again. James looked at the trees like he expected them to apologize. We started walking with the officers. The deputy stayed slightly behind, hand near his belt. The wildlife guys had gear. One had a long stick for moving brush. They had radios. I was still scratched up, but moving. James moved slow, leaning heavy on his walker, face tight with pain. We went in. I led them by memory, using the creek direction and a couple landmarks I remembered. A specific fallen log. A curved pine with a scar on its trunk. a patch of sand that looked lighter. For the first 20 minutes, I felt confident. Then my confidence started to fray, because as we got deeper, everything looked too normal. The brush wasn't disturbed. The palmetto wasn't bent. The smell wasn't there. I kept thinking, maybe it's farther. Maybe we came in at a slightly different angle last time. We found the creek, and my heart lifted. That part was real. That part I could follow. We walked along it. The water moved slow. The air was cooler near it. I pointed to where we'd hidden behind rocks, and the rocks were there. That made me feel both relief and dread. Here, I said, voice tight. We hid here. One of the wildlife officers crouched, examined the ground. Hard to see anything now, he said. Too much time. Wind and water move things. We kept going. I led them to where I thought the cave was. I knew it had been right there. That patch of brush. That hidden opening. My heart pounded as we approached. I could almost smell it again in my mind. Then we reached the spot. And it wasn't there. It was just palmetto and vines like the rest. Thick. Untouched. Untouched. No dark hole. No pushback brush. No scuffs in sand. I stopped walking like I'd hit a wall. No, I whispered. James behind me said, what? I turned in a circle, scanning. It was here, I said, voice rising. It was right here. The wildlife officer stepped forward, pushing the brush aside with his stick. Just sand, roots, plants, no opening. He looked at me with measured patience. You sure? He asked. Yes, I snapped, and immediately hated myself. I'm sure. It was right here. James hobbled up, breathing hard, and stared. His face went blank. Where is it? He whispered. The deputy said, could have been a different spot. It's easy to confuse. No, James said sharply. No, we saw it on the drone. He looked at me like I could fix it. Tell them, he said. I felt this weird shaking start in my hands. We were here, I said. We walked in. There were bones, a boot. The wildlife officer's eyes narrowed at boot again. He pushed deeper into the brush, checking for any depression or opening. Nothing. The deputy moved a little away and scanned the surrounding area. One of the wildlife officers said, sinkhole lips can collapse, especially with rain. I stared at him. It didn't rain, I said, and my voice sounded small. He shrugged slightly. Even without, he said. Sand shifts, James whispered. No. It was a cave. He sounded like a kid insisting on a memory. The officers searched. They walked a radius. They checked along the creek. They pushed through brush. We found nothing. After maybe an hour, one of them said, we can keep looking, but without coordinates. And he let the sentence trail off. I felt something crack in me, not like a bone, like a certainty. Because yes, there were logical reasons. GPS drift, panic, similar terrain. I know all of that. I could explain it in a report, but it didn't match what my body remembered. We didn't imagine all of that. James looked at me, eyes shiny. We're crazy, he whispered. No, I said, but I didn't sound sure. The deputy said, we're going to file this as an animal encounter with injury. That's what we can do. James opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked out at the trees, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked tired of chasing. We walked back to the trailhead in silence. A second, I smelled it again. Just a faint thread on the air, wet and sour, like something had walked by not long before. I stopped walking and turned my head. No one else noticed. James kept going. The officers kept talking quietly. The birds were making sounds again. I stood there, one heartbeat too long, my skin prickling. Then I forced myself to move. Because what was I going to do? Chase a smell into the woods? People want closure. They want a clear ending. They want me to say we found a footprint, we found hair, we found the drone, we proved it. We didn't. We never got the gear back. Not the drone, not the camera, not the bags. We searched later with friends, with a grid and GPS. We found little things. A water bottle, a torn strap, but not the important stuff. And the story became a thing that people used. James's channel blew up, not because he posted proof, but because he posted the confession of what happened, the hospital footage, the cast, the scars. People argued in comments. Hoax, bear, skunk ape, fake, trauma. He read every comment like it mattered, I didn't. I couldn't. I stopped going on hikes for a long time. Not dramatic. I just didn't. I'd drive by trailheads and feel my hands start to sweat. I'd hear a branch crack in a park and my chest would tighten. James changed too. He tried to pretend he didn't at first. He tried to be tough about it. But then he'd wake up at night shaking, and he'd say, "I saw its face again." He would ask me, "Do you think it was protecting babies? Do you think it was hungry? Do you think it recognized the drone?" And I'd say, "I don't know, because I don't. I don't know what it was. I know what it wasn't. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a man in a suit. It waited. It pushed us out. It hurt him just enough to make sure we remembered. And then it erased its home like it knew exactly what we'd do next." And the worst part is the shame. Not shame about believing in something weird. Shame about going in. Shame about letting content brain override my survival brain. And we walked out anyway. People ask me why I'm telling this now. I'm telling it because it doesn't go away. Because it sits in the back of your mind like a bruise you keep touching. Because every time someone jokes about Bigfoot, I see James on the ground clutching his leg, face twisted, trying not to scream so loud it would bring it back. And because there's one small thing I never told anyone publicly until now. When we first got to the hospital, before the deputy, before the wildlife officer, before James started spinning his story into a video, a nurse asked me what happened. Just one nurse, not official, just human. I looked at her and I started to say, "A bear." I had that word on my tongue. And then I remembered the way it looked into the drone camera. The way it stood like it was waiting for us outside its den. The way it backed off like it was choosing to let us leave. So I told the truth to that nurse in a whisper. "I think it was something that lives out there," I said. "And I think it knew we saw it." She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just nodded once, like it was the kind of truth you don't debate in a hospital at 3 in the morning. And she said very quietly while she adjusted my IV and kept her eyes on her hands, "Then don't go back." I didn't understand at the time why that hit me so hard. I do now, because it wasn't just advice. It sounded like a warning someone gives you when they've heard this before. I still dream about that place sometimes. Not the cave, not the bones, the creek, the rocks we hid behind. In the dream, I'm pressed into the sand trying to keep James quiet. Frogs are loud, like they're covering for us. The sun is up, everything looks normal. Then it all drops out. The woods go still, and that smell comes back. Wet animal, sour, clothes. Then I hear it. One slow exhale, right behind the rocks. Like something big is leaning in, taking its time. I always wake up before I look, heart racing. I lie there in the dark, listening to the building settle, and I think about James's face when we first saw it on the screen. This is going to ruin our lives. Not because anyone believed us or didn't. Because after that, you stop trusting quiet.